When Karoline Leavitt sat down for an interview, she expected a heated debate. What she didn't expect was a moment so explosive it would lead to the downfall of one of the most well-known TV hosts overnight. This wasn't a pre-recorded segment where producers could edit things out or smooth over awkward moments. No, this was live, raw, unfiltered, and the entire nation was watching. Caroline had been invited onto the Morning Exchange, a political talk show notorious for its sharp commentary and even sharper hosts. The man sitting across from her, veteran journalist Richard Calloway, had built his career on pushing guests into corners, exposing weaknesses, and controlling the narrative. His interviews weren't just tough, they were strategic. He played to win, and today his opponent was a rising conservative voice who had no intention of backing down. The segment started predictably. Richard pressed Caroline on media bias, accusing conservative outlets of distorting facts while claiming networks like his were simply correcting the record. Caroline countered with facts, listing numerous times mainstream media had manipulated narratives, omitted key details, or outright misled the public. It was intense but professional at first. Then the energy in the room shifted. Richard leaned forward, his tone sharpening. The calculated detachment he usually maintained started to slip. He wasn't debating anymore. He was attacking. "People like you," he sneered, his voice laced with frustration, "are the reason this country is regressing. You push this fake victimhood narrative, pretending conservatives are being silenced. In reality, you're the ones silencing everyone else." The studio fell silent. Caroline's posture remained composed, but her eyes sharpened. She had faced aggressive interviews before. But this was something else. She let the moment linger before responding. "Excuse me?" Richard didn't hesitate. In fact, he doubled down. "You act like free speech is under attack, but what you really want is control. Your people." He stopped, realizing mid-sentence that he had just made a critical mistake. But it was too late. The shift in the studio was instant. Producers exchanged tense glances. Crew members stiffened, realizing what had just happened. And Caroline? She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to interrupt. She simply leaned back and delivered the question that would send shockwaves across the country. "Would you like to clarify what you mean by your people?" Richard hesitated. A beat too long. The cameras were rolling, the internet was watching, and now the pressure was on him. He inhaled sharply. "I meant conservatives," he backtracked quickly. "People like you, who push an agenda of grievance instead of progress." Caroline tilted her head. "So, just to be clear," she said, her voice controlled and precise, "when you said your people, you weren't referring to anything beyond political ideology?" Richard's lips thinned. He recognized the trap he had walked into. If he pushed back, he risked confirming what millions were already thinking. If he admitted it was a mistake, he looked weak. So he chose a third option. He changed the subject. "Oh, come on, Caroline," he scoffed, forcing a chuckle. "Don't play the victim. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Bad faith outrage. You know exactly what I meant. But instead of engaging in real debate, you'd rather twist my words and make this about you." Caroline didn't flinch. She let his words settle, then delivered the final blow. "I don't need to twist anything, Richard. Your words speak for themselves." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, and then he made the fatal mistake. "You know what?" he said, exhaling sharply. "Maybe if conservatives spent less time playing the victim and more time actually contributing something to society, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Silence. Not just in the studio, but across the millions watching from home. Even Richard seemed to realize what he had just done. His lips parted as if to soften the statement, but it was too late. Caroline let the words hang before responding, her voice unwavering. "Are you saying conservatives don't contribute to society, Richard?" He rolled his shoulders back, trying to regain control. "I'm saying this constant whining about being canceled is exhausting." Caroline nodded, letting the moment breathe. She didn't need to say anything else. The damage had already been done. The second the segment ended, the internet erupted. Clips of Richard's comments flooded social media, with one snippet spreading faster than wildfire. Maybe if conservatives spent less time playing the victim and more time actually contributing something to society. No context, no prelude. Just that sentence looping endlessly. Within hours, hashtags started trending. Political commentators from both sides weighed in. Some condemned Richard outright, while others scrambled to defend him, claiming his words were taken out of context. But the full-length clip only made things worse. By midday, major advertisers began distancing themselves from the morning exchange. 3 sponsors suspended their partnerships. By nightfall, that number had doubled. The network was bleeding money, and executives were in full-blown crisis mode. And Karoline? She didn't have to say much. She simply retweeted the clip with a single thinking face emoji. Behind closed doors at WBC News, panic had set in. The controversy wasn't dying down. It was getting worse. Viewers flooded the network's inbox, demanding action. Advertisers weren't just pausing sponsorships anymore. They were pulling out entirely. At 3 p.m. the following day, WBC News issued an official statement. Richard Calloway has been placed on indefinite suspension while we conduct an internal review of yesterday's broadcast. WBC News remains committed to respectful and fair journalism. Corporate speak, for we're waiting to see how bad this gets before we throw him under the bus. But the internet had no patience for half measures. The suspension wasn't enough. People wanted termination. That evening, Karoline was asked on another show, "Do you think Richard Calloway should be fired?" She paused before answering. "I think people in positions of influence should be held accountable for their words." The next morning, WBC News made its final decision. At 9:15 a.m., they announced, "Effective immediately, Richard Calloway is no longer affiliated with WBC News. We thank him for his years of service and wish him the best in his future endeavors." Richard Calloway was gone, but the conversation was far from over. Had justice been served, or was this another example of cancel culture going too far? Was this about accountability, or was it about silencing voices? And most importantly, who decides what crosses the line? One thing is for sure, this won't be the last time something like this happens. And when it does, the real question remains: whose side will you be on?